In a quiet suburban neighborhood nestled just outside Raleigh, North Carolina, every home looked nearly identical. Beige siding, matching shutters, and manicured lawns trimmed to regulation height. Among them stood Evelyn Parker's home, a small two-story house with a front yard unlike any other. While her neighbors kept grass no taller than 2 inches, Evelyn's yard bloomed with wildflowers, herbs, and colorful vines that curled along her white picket fence. It wasn't messy, it was magical. Bees hummed lazily around lavender stalks, butterflies danced above zinnias, and a small stone path wound through sunflowers that stood taller than Evelyn herself. For Evelyn, that garden wasn't just decoration, it was therapy. After losing her husband 3 years earlier, she'd found solace in planting life where there had been loss. Every bloom was a quiet reminder that healing takes root in time and patience. The neighbors admired it quietly. Children from down the street often stopped by to pick a daisy or two, and even the mailman took his time walking past her yard. But not everyone saw beauty in it. The HOA did not approve. At first, it started with warning letters, standard printed notices with bold red text. Your yard violates community appearance guidelines. Evelyn tried to reason with the board, explaining that her plants were all native species, meant to help pollinators. But the board president, Cynthia Briggs, saw it differently. Cynthia was the kind of person who measured power in property lines. Her lawn looked like a golf course, artificial perfection, without a single weed in sight. To her, Evelyn's wildflowers were chaos. At an HOA meeting one Thursday evening, Cynthia held up a photo of Evelyn's yard as an example of non-compliance. This, she declared, is what happens when residents ignore the rules. It makes our neighborhood look unkempt. A few members nodded in agreement, but others shifted uncomfortably. They knew Evelyn, knew her kindness, but no one dared to speak up against Cynthia. The next day, Evelyn received another notice, a $200 fine for failure to maintain property standards. She sighed, folded the paper neatly, and placed it on her counter. She couldn't afford to keep paying fines. Her small pension barely covered the bills, and gardening was the one joy she refused to give up. Weeks passed. Evelyn ignored the letters and continued to water her garden each morning. But one June afternoon, while she was inside baking banana bread, a sound shattered the calm, the deep growl of machinery. She rushed outside to find a crew of landscapers standing at her fence, guided by none other than Cynthia Briggs. "What are you doing?" Evelyn shouted. Cynthia crossed her arms. "We've given you multiple notices. This property is in violation of HOA landscaping regulations. We're restoring it to compliance." Evelyn's voice trembled. "These are my flowers. You can't just..." But before she could finish, a man on a riding mower plowed through her front yard, cutting down row after row of her beloved blooms. The air filled with the sickening sound of shredding stems and snapping petals. Lavender, sunflowers, daisies, all flattened within minutes. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, watching in silent disbelief. A few filmed the scene on their phones, but no one stepped in. When the mower stopped, Evelyn stood barefoot in the grass, tears streaking her face as she stared at the ruin. Her sanctuary gone. Cynthia gave a cold smile. "You'll thank us later. The neighborhood looks much tidier now." Then she turned and walked away. That night, rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady. Evelyn sat by her window, watching droplets mix with the shredded remains of her flowers. Her heart ached, not just for the loss of the garden, but for the cruelty behind it. But nature, as she would soon learn, had its own way of balancing the scales. In the days that followed, Evelyn barely stepped outside. The once colorful yard now looked barren, a patch of muddy soil where beauty used to live. But something unexpected began to happen. Where the mower had torn through the earth, small green shoots began to rise again. Tiny, defiant stems pushed through the dirt, reclaiming the space that had been taken. The rain had carried seeds deeper into the ground, scattering them beyond the fence line. By mid-July, the first blooms appeared, wild asters and coneflowers, followed by bursts of goldenrod that reached toward the sun. The garden wasn't gone. It was fighting back. Meanwhile, the HOA's problems were only beginning. The landscapers hired to restore Evelyn's yard had accidentally disrupted the neighborhood's drainage line. Within a week, several nearby lawns, including Cynthia's, began flooding after every rainfall. Perfect green grass turned to swampy puddles. Residents started complaining at every HOA meeting. Cynthia blamed the weather, but homeowners weren't convinced. When one of them mentioned that the drainage had been damaged near Evelyn's property, the murmurs grew louder. One neighbor pulled up a video he'd taken of the destruction that day. The footage clearly showed Cynthia supervising the crew as they ripped up Evelyn's yard. Was this authorized by the community vote? Someone asked. Cynthia froze. As president, I have discretionary authority over landscaping compliance. But that wasn't true. The HOA bylaws required a board vote for any major action. Word spread fast. Residents who once ignored HOA politics suddenly wanted answers. A few even went to Evelyn's house to apologize, offering to help replant what she'd lost. Evelyn, gracious as ever, thanked them. By August, Evelyn's garden had become a symbol, a quiet act of rebellion wrapped in color and scent. Bees returned, butterflies danced again, and even the local newspaper took notice. A small article appeared, "Residents' Garden Reborn After HOA Controversy." The headline went viral in the local community group online. Dozens of comments poured in, people supporting Evelyn, criticizing the HOA, demanding Cynthia's removal. At the next HOA meeting, the room was packed. Cynthia sat stiffly at the front, tapping her pen on the table. Evelyn attended, standing near the back, calm but resolute. One by one, homeowners voiced their anger. The destroyed garden, the drainage issue, the unnecessary fines. Everything came pouring out. Finally, a motion was made to vote on Cynthia's position as president. When the votes were counted, the result was unanimous. Cynthia Briggs was removed from the board. The new president, a retired schoolteacher named Marjorie Allen, walked straight to Evelyn after the meeting. "I'm so sorry for what happened to you," she said softly, "and I want to make things right." Within a week, the board issued a formal apology and waived all of Evelyn's previous fines. They even passed a new bylaw allowing eco-friendly and pollinator gardens as an approved landscaping style. Evelyn didn't say much. She simply smiled, thanked them, and returned to tending her soil. That autumn, her garden reached full bloom again, brighter and wilder than ever. Monarch butterflies fluttered across the yard like orange petals in the wind. The neighbors who once followed strict uniformity now planted flowers of their own, inspired by Evelyn's resilience. Even nature seemed to join in on the justice. Cynthia's pristine yard never recovered from the drainage damage. Mold took over her grass, and her ornamental bushes began to die. Eventually, she sold her house and moved away. But Evelyn stayed. Each morning, she'd step outside with a cup of tea, watching her flowers sway gently in the breeze. She no longer saw her garden as rebellion, it was restoration. A living reminder that beauty can rise again, even after destruction. The HOA sign at the neighborhood entrance still read, "A community of order and harmony." But now, harmony finally meant something real. And in the center of it all, Evelyn's garden stood, untamed, radiant, and free.